My dear soul sisters, today's episode deals with some very sensitive subjects, including abortion, which can be very triggering for some listeners. Our goal is never to judge or condemn, but rather discuss extremely difficult subjects with love. And we love you.
It was so beautiful. He reminded me that there's no sin in heaven, and she forgives me. She can't not, and that she's whole, and that she looks forward to meeting me one day. And knowing that she forgave me allowed me to forgive myself, right? Because I was her mother. I'm her mother.
Hey guys, welcome back to Soul Sisters Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Alex.
And I'm Daniella.
And we are so glad to have you back this week on this episode of the Soul Sisters. I'm going to let Daniella introduce our guest because she has hyped her up, so I'm going to let her hype her up some more.
Hype her up. I'm going to hype her up. Guys, we have an amazing guest with us today. We have Christina Bishop here today, and we are going to get in it. We're going to talk about some deep subjects, but very much about healing and purpose and the amazingness of God, honestly. So, Christina, thank you so much for being here and sharing with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm honored. It's really a privilege.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Christina goes to my church, so I did Freedom Group through her leading, and it was very healing in a lot of ways. And just you sharing a couple times with the group, I was like, oh my gosh, like your testimony is so amazing. And you just have such a heart for just for everybody. I feel like you just have a heart to share all the great things that God has done in your life, and it just is so contagious, and I love it. So I was like, Christina has such a great story. I really want her on the show. So however we want to start. I mean, I know that body image and self-hatred were kind of a common theme in your life, and I think is a common theme for a lot of women, almost every woman, I would say.
Sure.
So how did you get to that place and find some sort of healing for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, oh gosh. So kind of growing up, I felt a little bit awkward in my body anyways. I think we all kind of go through that.
Yeah.
I was taller than most of the other kids. I developed younger, puberty hit early. So I felt awkward. I was the girl with curves and, when all my friends were pencil thin and, so I always kind of felt awkward in my own skin. But, I think many of us, even really thin people, kind of have their own quirks about their image as well. But sort of adding into that and sort of piling on it, because I developed young, I received a lot of attention from boys that were older and did not have very good intentions. I'll just say that. So I received a lot of attention in that way. But I had a lot of other self-esteem issues also that really kind of were around my family upbringing and my home life as a child. So, in that, had a father who was an alcoholic, who was abusive in a lot of ways. So I was always looking for love, I guess you could say. So this dangerous combination of looking for love and getting attention from older boys who were not looking for love was really kind of it was just a very dangerous combination for my young heart and my young spirit. So that was kind of a little bit into some of the pieces of where some of that started to come from.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have kind of similar stories. But
Yeah,
we're like,
I was going to say,
we feel
I
like
can
an
speak.
outsider. We feel weird. We feel like, what is wrong with me? Why don't I look like that? And that whole thing of growing up, that's such a tricky age. Wow. Like
It
puberty, like, and even like pre-puberty, even even elementary school, girls can be mean to each other, or we start to develop a self-awareness of our body. And we're like, oh, our bodies are going to look different. And like that whole thing, it's like, it's a lot.
Sure. And I, even remember my mom not having a lot of conversations with me. So I remember getting my first menstrual cycle and I was like, I didn't
What's
know what
that?
was happening. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what to
Yeah.
do. And
Yeah.
my mom wasn't at home, so I got my sister to help me and, that kind of thing. But I was so young. I was 10 in 5th grade. So, thankfully I was at home.
Yeah.
But that in and of itself was just awkward. And I think, even growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, yes, that's how old I am. I just aged myself.
You look amazing.
Thank you. Kind of growing up in that era, parents didn't really talk to girls about issues. They didn't talk about their bodies. They didn't talk about our development.
Yeah.
They didn't talk with us about sex or, all those boyfriends. I don't even I remember my mom talking with me about like good touch, bad touch,
Yeah.
So, those kinds of things. So what is normal? What is okay? What is
Right.
appropriate? What's not? And so, fast forwarding as a mom now, I make those conversations a priority, even if they don't like it.
Yes.
It's okay. But we didn't have those conversations. So I
Yeah.
was very confused and I was
Yeah.
really uncomfortable. And like I said, developing early, I just felt like I didn't kind of fit or I was weird
Yeah.
or if I'm curvy, does that mean I'm fat?
Right. Right.
You just kind of struggle with those
Right.
things. Yeah.
It is. It's tricky. And I think you made a great point of like sharing with your kids. You have to be to the point with them. You can't like
Yeah.
dance around or whatever. Just,
Right.
I love that you just like got to tell them.
You
this
have
is,
to tell them.
This
'cause
is
if they're
good. This
not-
is right. This is wrong.
Right.
And if they're not
Keep it
learning it
simple.
from you, they're learning it from someone else.
Right.
Right. Or
Yeah.
TV or movies or whatever
Right.
nonsense. Yeah.
Well, and honestly, especially personally, I'm a Christian. I've been walking with the Lord for, I don't know, I guess I'd have to count backwards. Probably about a little over 20 years, maybe like 23 years. But I think the danger is that the world perverts our bodies and sex.
Totally.
But the church shames it in a lot of ways. So I think there's a lot of misguided conversations even coming from the church. And we
Totally.
have to get comfortable talking with our daughters or gentlemen talking with your sons about our bodies, about what's normal, about the purpose, about
Yeah.
why we should wait, why our bodies are precious. And I think we don't do that. We just tell them, no, don't do it. It's bad. Well, it's really not bad. And my body's not bad. And I shouldn't be shamed and like hiding. Adam and
Totally.
Eve walked in the garden and they were naked and unashamed, but
Right.
they were together in marriage and purpose. So,
Right.
it's like recognizing that that's the reason. But again, I think it's kind of like a taboo conversation.
It's so hard because growing up in the church, like you feel like it's like sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad. And then all of a sudden you get married. Like speaking from my own personal story, all of a sudden I got married as a virgin and I'm like, oh God, here we go. And it's like I was excited for all of that fun stuff. But then at the same time, I felt a lot of shame. Like the first year or so of marriage, I was like, okay, this is not bad. This is good. But at the same time,
Am I supposed to enjoy this?
but at the same time, it's like this, it's like you had to rewire your brain. It's like, all of a sudden something that's bad becomes good. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it's like, how do you
flip
make
the
that
switch?
mind shift
Right.
change, And it was
Yes.
very tricky because there's not that, I don't know where, I guess it's just because of that messaging
Right.
got skewed.
Yes.
And so I don't know if there's any other Christian women out there, but I was like, oh my gosh, it took me a while to change that perspective and it was hard.
Yes. And I see that. I was not personally raised in the church, so I did not have
That
it's bad.
experience, yeah.
I had the perverted version of
Right.
like,
Do
body
it.
and sex or
Yeah.
or like, you do it, if you do it, they'll love you, or this is how you get it. This is how you are worth. Like this. So a
Totally.
lot of that, my worth and value became like, okay, what could I be for somebody else, or what could I
Right.
do for somebody else? And unfortunately, that took me down a very dark and painful path. And, it's part of my story at a very, very young age through that, looking for love and trying to fit in and what is this all about? And people are talking about sex and it's this and it's that. At a very young age, I had an unplanned pregnancy and I didn't even know I was pregnant. I didn't know that was a thing because in my perception, pregnancy came when you're married.
Right.
I knew people that were married that had kids. I
Right.
didn't really know people who didn't have kids that were married. And I'm sure there were. Again, I was a kid myself. And so it came, I experienced that. And so several, weeks into it, I kind of realized that I hadn't had a period. And I said something to my sister and she's like, well, maybe you're pregnant. I thought, well, that can't be, no, it's not possible. So I did what any rational teenager would do. I went to the drugstore, I was broke, and I stole a pregnancy test.
As one does.
As one does. does. I mean, what else do you do? You know,
Honestly,
which,
though,
again, I wasn't raised in the church. We'll just remind everybody.
you're like,
of
I
that.
need this. Bye.
Well, right. It's like, what do you do?
But you kind of need. I mean,
So again, I'm not justifying it, but it was like, well, I don't know what else to do. So
you were left with
stole a
little
test.
other recourse.
Right. And I certainly wasn't going to ask my parents at that point. So, and much to my shock, it came out positive. And that moment really changed the trajectory of my childhood. I was a child. I was 13. I was literally in 8th grade. So, here's this girl growing up in an abusive household with all these other daddy issues and, traumas and things, who's now starting down this path that we fear our kids might walk down one day, or going, okay, well, here's another statistic, right? I could have easily been, and I was in that moment, I was a statistic, and it really changed the trajectory of my childhood and really carried into my adulthood for decades. It still has changed, it still has impacts me today, but just in a different way.
Wow. So how did you how did you get to the other side of that? I know that's a huge story, but like,
oh boy. Yeah. Well, that pregnancy, again, I didn't realize for quite some time, probably a couple months, because they didn't have period apps back then. I didn't track it. So once I finally realized it, I had to tell my parents. They made the decision for me to have an abortion. They felt like I was a kid, I didn't need to raise a kid. And that, again, was another very traumatic experience for a child. I was a child. And, but that then became my identity. It became, well, this is what you do. This is who you are. And it led to other pregnancies as well. About a year, I'm guessing, later, I found myself pregnant again. And that pregnancy led to a miscarriage, probably still had healing my body hadn't overcome. And then years down the road at 19, now an adult, I found myself pregnant yet again, my third unplanned pregnancy. But that pregnancy, I made a different decision. At that time, I was old enough to decide what I wanted. And I still didn't know the Lord, but I knew somewhere in my heart that I just couldn't do that again because I already hated myself. And I thought somehow maybe having this baby would
heal
make
you.
everything. Yeah, it would heal me. It would bring back the other baby, or it would make everything okay. And I'm proud to say that baby girl is 24 years old today, and she stole my heart the moment she was born. And she didn't heal me though. Guys, kids can't heal you. They can't, but the Lord did use her life again to change my direction. I got away from, partying and doing things that weren't serving me well. My purpose became to live for her and to make sure I was working and providing and create a different home for her than what I had. So while she didn't heal me, God did use this little person again to once again steer my direction.
Wow.
So again, through that, so many stories, but then through that, my path to healing, though, didn't start to come for quite some time yet. Although I thought this was going to be it. She was going to be it. She was going to redeem my past. She couldn't bring back the other child. She couldn't, because it was a different child.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so much to be
we could unpack that for a week, but it is. Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
How do you feel like you were able to, did you harbor a lot of anger, I guess, towards your parents when you realized what was happening as a teenager?
Actually, I didn't. I blamed myself. So I recognize some people blame others. I took on a different response to most traumas in my life. I somehow figured it was my fault. With having a father that was an alcoholic, I went through years of codependency. And so that really, I didn't know what that was. I'd never heard of that for a long time until I did do counseling eventually. And then I was like, oh, there's a word for this, which was helpful. But my way of sort of dealing was to go, okay, well, it's not their fault. It must be mine. Because while they made that decision, I made the first decision. The pregnancy wasn't their fault. So this is my fault. And the miscarriage was probably a punishment. And, the things I'm not going to have in life, I thought that somehow God was going to punish me. And I didn't even know there was a God. I just felt like my life was doomed. I mean, I knew that there was someone out there, but I wasn't raised in church. I'd heard of Jesus, you know, I'd seen crosses. We celebrated Christmas and Easter, but more of like Santa and the bunny.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Right.
But I knew what the holidays
The commercial version.
Right, yeah, the Hallmark stories. Yeah, the commercial version. So, you know, but I'd heard of Jesus and I kind of knew what those holidays represented, but they didn't have any meaning to me. So I knew there was this some God, but he must hate me because I hated me. So how could he love me if I hate me? You know, so that became that self. So I hated my body. I hated who I was. I hated, and I just felt like I was going to live the life that I deserved. Yeah.
And how did that, where did you encounter the Lord? How did that all shift?
Well, gosh, and that's a long journey. This is part of my passion. I know there are some people out there that have a huge passion to reach people for Jesus, and I think that's amazing. My passion is to help the people who already met Jesus but still hate themselves, because I think so much of the church is walking around still in shame and in pain.
Yes.
And that meeting of Jesus is foundational and essential, but that's just the start, and he doesn't want to leave you there.
Right.
And so that's kind of where my passion comes in at. And so I was accepted Jesus as my Savior sometime in the early 2000s. I don't remember. I didn't write the date down. I remember the circumstance, but I still carried that hate and that pain for a very, very long time. I had married my daughter's father. We ended up divorced, and through all kinds of circumstances and things like that, I later on you know, was dating somebody that was also a very unhealthy relationship. We'll just say that. It was a very unhealthy. Well, I wasn't healthy, and neither was he. And so there came a point that I did go through counseling, and it was very helpful. I recommend people, if you don't know if you should do counseling does not mean you're crazy. It means that you have somebody to process with that can help you understand things and pull out, you know, different parts of your story to make some sense of it, maybe to just work through it. And remember, whatever is hidden, the Lord can't heal. When he starts to show you things, it's because he wants to heal it.
Yes.
He's not trying to have you relive the pain so you can get stuck. It's like, are you ready? He wants to pull it out. Let's expose it to the light. And the counseling really helped do a lot of that. I also had another type of therapy in there, EMDR. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that here, but it was really helpful also. But that was another helpful component. But it helped reveal a lot of my past and unpack some things, but my healing didn't necessarily come there. I was then able to take these things to the Lord, but that came to a head when I was coming to the tail end of this other unhealthy relationship. I was a shell of a person. At this time, it was probably 2015, 2016, and I still hated me. I still did. I loved God. I knew I needed a Savior, but I still hated me. And I had unpacked a lot of things, but I still had that. Like, I'm still shameful, and I still don't deserve good. God wants good for me, but I don't deserve it. So I had that. I had two friends in that season that came alongside me. So from counseling, you know, counseling and friends and the Lord, it was really kind of a combination of several different resources the Lord used that really loved me well, that started to minister to me in a way like about God's love in a new way. It wasn't just a church sermon. It wasn't just a Bible verse. And I say I say that lightly because the Bible is very powerful, but it was hard for me to believe it for me. And so they really helped me to understand and show me and teach me ways to seek out God's love for me. And I'll never forget, there was one day, one of these friends said to me, you know, what is God saying to you? I said, I don't hear God. Yes, you do. I said, no, I don't. Yes, you do. Listen, what do you hear? I'm like, I hear chatter in the background. I don't understand what you're saying. He's like, I'm not talking about the audible voice. What do you hear? And I said, I don't hear anything. And they said to me, well, here's your homework assignment. They gave me a homework assignment. A friend.
Good friends.
Friends give homework.
Good
I'm just
friends.
like, this is not school. No. They gave me a couple of scriptures to go home and read and said, I want you to go home or tonight and read through these scriptures and just sit and be quiet. And I did. I was like, all right, well, I'm going to do this. I like instructions. I can be obedient. So I had these instructions and I went home and for the first time in my life, I pulled out a journal. And it's like, okay, well, and they told me, get out a journal, whatever you hear in your heart or in your mind, just write it down. Just write it down. So I started journaling. And through that, it turned from me writing down my thoughts to all of a sudden God speaking to me, because it was all of a sudden I was being dressed in you. And I'm like, oh, and it was this incredible moment where I recognized that the Lord was actually speaking to me. And over the course of the next several months, like, I was so excited to do that. Like, every night it became a season of the Lord and I, and these few friends that ministered, but it was just really me and Jesus in a lot of ways. And noting and journaling. And through that, he taught me a lot about my daughter who's in heaven.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
and
so awesome.
It was such a healing time. Sorry.
That's
I get choked up.
It was powerful.
It was so beautiful. He reminded me that there's no sin in heaven, and she forgives me. She can't not. And that she's whole, and that she looks forward to meeting me one day. And knowing that she forgave me allowed me to forgive myself, right? Because I was her mother.
Yeah.
I'm her mother. And I was created to protect her. And I didn't. And I don't know as though I could have saved her, because, I didn't really make the decision, but I didn't try. I didn't try. I didn't fight for her. I didn't suggest adoption. I don't even know if I knew what that was. But I had held on to so much pain for so long that I didn't even try. And having my firstborn daughter, kind of the reality that this was my child hit me. So while that was a beautiful redemptive moment that I had a baby, she was also a reminder that I had another baby, and I didn't fight for her, And so having that and working through that, and I was truly able in that moment to forgive me. And, God says, forgive that you may be forgiven. I had to forgive me so he could forgive me, so that I could receive that, And it was a beautiful journey. And it's, that was the moment that I realized that, God can love me, and he does love me, to show me those things about my child. And so that was kind of the next start in my path in my journey of healing. But I think he had to go there first, because I couldn't have believed him for the rest while I still held on to the shame and the hatred of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so amazing how God gives us these comforts that we don't even think we need, or maybe we don't even deserve. We feel like we deserve. But he blesses us with that. What an amazing comfort.
I'm gone. I'm gone. It's just
we're all gone.
So much of what you said resonates with me. So I see a lot of myself in you.
Yeah.
And so it's been a struggle. It's been a struggle loving myself, because I was on the same boat. You look for love at home and it's not there. So you look for it. It tends to come elsewhere.
Yeah.
And again, the world has it has a perverse view of what love is, and it led me down, like I said, a dark path. Luckily, I did not have to bear the burden of any kind of unplanned pregnancy, because I don't think I would have made it. I don't think I would have been able to handle it with as much grace as you did. The whole situation, but you carry that self-hate, and you don't realize, and you start like you said, when you start to validate these things that happen to you with, oh, I deserve it because I am this disgusting human. I am this horrible person.
Yeah.
And I'm a Christian too. I'm very new. And I grew up in a Christian household, but I never had a relationship with Christ until recently, and we're still kind of on rocky terms.
That's all right.
I'm still trying to, I'm like, where are you? Because I need, so to hear someone who has had the same struggle is so validating.
Yeah.
Because I'm, at first I was like, it's me again. I'm clearly not doing something right here. I'm missing something. I'm not, going where I need to be going. But having your example has been so eye-opening and has been so comforting. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through it. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you for sharing your experience.
You're welcome. You're very welcome.
It's a very healing thing.
Good. Well, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. And honestly, it's just, I didn't handle it with grace for so long. You know, I just, it was self-sabotaging, but that's not God's plan for me. And that's not God's plan for you either. You know, he has good things in store. Yeah. And so just even now, when I think about what Jesus did for me, I can't not love him. Yeah, I don't deserve that, you know, like my worship comes from that place. I often, like, there's going to come a day where, you know, when I'll be in heaven, I get to talk with him, and I'm kind of interested in talking with the woman at the well and, you know, all these other women that, you know, the woman that was caught in the act of adultery and all those other things, because they paved the way for women today, even who have experienced, you know, whether it's sexual promiscuity or whatever that is, you know, just I found hope in their stories, you know, like I get to sit and talk with these women someday. Let's go sit at the well and talk. You know, what was it like for them in that moment? But I think, again, not being raised in church yet, I know there's hope even for other women who don't know the Lord or who do know the Lord for their redemptive story as well, because his portion is good. What he has is good. And that's kind of, again, that start. So I'm glad that my story has been helpful for you.
Thank you so much. Because I know it's clearly something tough to talk about, but you just started going into it, and I was like, this is like a mirror. This is like, what is this? Yeah. And so, it just hit me so hard.
And I think it's like a thing that, it's like a secret thing that we don't want to talk about. And like, it's definitely something that the church doesn't want to talk about, is like, you know, all of these experiences that we have, and we're, you know, that shame comes in, and we don't want to talk about it. But
shame is such a huge proponent of why, you know, it's not something that I want to talk about, because maybe to my face you're like, oh no, it's okay, you know, you're forgiven, but I don't know what you're like behind my back. That's always been my concern, and and it shouldn't really be any of my concern, because hey, whatever. Okay. But it's always been, you know, what do you think of me? I'm you know, this life that I've lived, and I've always, you know, you sweep it under the rug and you try to deal with it as best as you can, but it always tends to resurface, and you go into this cycle of self-loathing, and it's vicious, and it's recurring. Draining. And it's very draining. So to have, like I said, to have an example, to have someone, to see someone who's been able to see the other side, to come to the other side, is very life-giving, very refreshing.
Yeah, good. That's amazing. You know, and I think even, you know, just to think about, you know, the time and age that we live in now, with technology being so prevalent, all we see on social media is how everything is so great, and their lives are so wonderful, and they're so happy, and you know, all those things. So we really want to hide even more. Yet our lives are really public, but what part of our lives are we showing? Right. And so we just want to hide those things that we don't want people to see or know, because we have flesh, you know, as much as we're spirit, and you know, we're only to fear God. Our flesh has fear of judgment. We don't want to be judged by other people, and we really don't, you know. So that's as much as it's not supposed to matter. Let's be honest. Most of the time it does. It matters to me what people think about me. And I still have that. It's different today. If somebody doesn't like me as much, or they don't think I look nice or whatever, I've moved past that, but what matters to me now is, do they see Jesus? That's what I want. I want them to recognize that, okay, she's living her life for the Lord. You know, that's what I want them to see.
That's what I see.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Daniella.
That's what
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm not always great with it. Just understand that too. We all have moments. So
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I love that you're bringing up the fact that we hide so much, and there can't be healing and freedom when we're hiding.
Right.
And I think that that's so important. I feel like that's something I've been learning a lot in the last, since Freedom Group, is like we have to go into those ugly, scary places.
We do.
And sometimes we don't even remember where we put those secrets. Like it's like a house and
Yes.
it's like in a wall in the attic, and we have to like, it's like, oh crap, I
Yes.
forgot that thing is in there still. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
only then, when it's like fully open and we give the Lord all of those gross little spots that we've hidden, is when we can truly find that freedom and that deliverance of
Absolutely.
like, of that shame and that guilt and that, yeah, that feeling of like, oh, I'm such a nasty, gross soul.
Yeah, I'm just such a, and that's mostly for like having been a sexually promiscuous person. Like it literally feels like a physical nastiness that you just can't shake. It's like it's heavy, like it's a film on you almost that you just can't seem to like get off. And it's been something that I've just been constantly struggling with, just trying to bring it to the Lord and be like, I don't, and it has, I definitely feel a lot more free. But of course, I think the residual, there is some residual left, just to make sure, just to say, just know that this is where I brought you from. This is,
Natural consequences.
yeah. This is, just remember where you have been so that you can realize where you are, type of situation. So I'm not necessarily upset about that, because it makes me grateful to know that I'm out. Like there's no desire to be there anymore. There's no, it's just, yeah, when you come from that, there's just like this ick, this physical, just disgust that comes with that, which I don't know if the church knows how to deal with that specifically. Because it's almost like, well, you should, because that's what you've done. It's like, well, okay, I did do it, but I want to move past. I want to have an intimate relationship with my husband alone, without these other people bombarding my psyche.
Yes.
So can you help me get past that? I understand,
How do I get rid of these?
and I repent, but at the same time, please give me a way to kind of just take this film of disgust off, so that way I can live in freedom.
In Freedom Group that Christina helps lead, it's an amazing program that multiple churches do, and there's a specific session called Spiritual Ties. And I feel like that is such a key thing that we don't even think about sometimes. Like maybe it's very prevalent, or maybe for some people it's like, oh my God, I totally forgot that that's kind of like lingering in me. And there's this very special time where you literally like write this person's name down and you leave it on the altar, and it's such a powerful thing to like say, I'm done with this, like bye, like done. This is no longer part of me. And that was really key to, I think, to a lot of my healing, and like so many women, is these spiritual ties that we hold on to.
We do.
No matter if it was one person or 20 people or 50, you know what I mean? And I think it's just because we're such spiritual beings that we hold on to like all these experiences so tightly, and it can be really hard to like rid
it's
yourself
hard.
of that.
I mean, when you are coming into union with someone sexually, it's a spiritual thing.
It is.
So you create that spiritual union with that person, and it's not something that can be easily broken. So I think I know that in church, obviously we have to teach abstinence, but then you don't go into the why.
Right.
As
exactly.
to why you should because now looking back, I'm like, oh, this is why I should have abstained.
Right.
Like I
You
want to
don't realize that you're going to be spiritually tied to them forever.
Yeah, you don't. No one tells you that because they're like, oh, STDs. It's like, okay, that's scary. And then you find like weird loopholes as someone who's like, oh, just
do it this way.
Yeah, just wear a condom or like whatever. Or,
Right.
avoid. If you see something weird, don't.
Safe sex.
Yeah.
Safe sex versus
Exactly.
yeah.
But they don't tell you, and some women want to, diminish that. Some women, maybe they can. I don't know. I could never. But yeah, I don't think the church really realizes the why the abstinence is so important.
Right.
Because,
until people like you share.
Well, I'm trying. I'm trying to share it in a more eloquent way without the
No,
but,
it's our stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because to try to be fulfilled with your husband just becomes so increasingly difficult.
Yes. It's very true.
It's hard because you're trying to be in a moment of intimacy, and then look who just popped into my head.
Yeah.
X or Y or Z.
Yes.
I'm like, I get out.
It's a real thing.
It is.
It is a real thing, and it's tough. It's tough to deal with.
It very much is. And I love that you even mentioned that, sexual intimacy is really spirit. I mean, the Bible says that. It's not just skin on skin. It's a spiritual exchange. And I agree, breaking that spiritual stronghold, it's impossible for us to do, but it's not too hard for God to do. And so that is something he can do, and he does do. And so there is healing and there is hope in that. I know Daniella just had mentioned that segment of understanding soul ties and breaking them, and that is very real. So it he can do that and do that in a moment. We just have to remember that freedom isn't a one-time event. It's daily, and we have to continue to turn away from that. And I think also, one of the fastest growing forms of intimacy in our country, or whatever, sexual intimacy, is obviously pornography. And it's just as dangerous. Even though there is no skin on skin, it's still a spiritual act. And the fastest growing group demographic is actually women of looking at pornography. And I don't know if that's because so many men already look at it, so that's why it's the fastest growing demographic. But it's just as dangerous to our spirit, and being able to connect with your spouse in intimacy, because all of a sudden, like you said, you're getting these images of this other person or these other people. So as much as it's hard to talk about, they're very, very real conversations that we should have. And even as you'd mentioned, the Lord wants to heal those things. He really does. But we have to be willing to, as you said, Danielle, let him in there, open those doors, and talking with a person who's trusted. I don't mean necessarily tattooing it on your forehead, but who is somebody that you trust, that loves you, that also knows the Lord, that can be an accountability partner for you. If you're struggling in different, sexual areas, whether it's, masturbation or pornography or, just sexual promiscuity. Maybe you're not married yet. Maybe you're dating somebody and you're in love and you're planning on getting married, so it's okay. God wants you to save that and reserve that for that time of marriage. And so they're having that conversation with somebody can help open the door, whether it's a pastor, a counselor, again, somebody who also knows the Lord, who isn't going to be like, oh, it's okay, just do it. Everybody's doing it. It's no big deal. We don't need that. We need the friend who's going to be like, okay, I'm here for you. I love you. Thank you for telling me. Now let's see if we can, help you through this. Who's going to point you back to the Word of God, because that's where the truth is.
That's so good. And I think that's such a great point, is there's this realness to it, other than the scariness of STDs and pregnancies. It's there is a spiritual element that lingers forever and ever and ever, and that God, yes, he can remove those things, but making it I think it's important to share our stories, which is why I love Christina's story. And I knew it was going to make such an impact on our listeners, is because it's yes, without our stories, it just sounds like a bunch of fluff. It's don't do this because blah, blah, blah. It's okay, whatever. Like you said, there's no good reason to abstinence other than saying, actually, it can be dangerous for our soul. So, you know what I mean? I think that's and especially telling these young girls, it's all about that information, right? As a young girl, to be showing them that who they are in the Lord is beautiful. And then also being there's this very important thing called soul ties. You don't want it other than with your husband, and just the beauty of sex and like, and having that open conversation so that when they get married, they don't have these like shameful thoughts of like, whatever, you know, like there's so many facets to it. There's so many facets.
Well, and even tying your story into that. So you did abstain and you waited till marriage, but it's like, okay, now what? So again, how do we have like that balance of conversation? You know, we don't want to shame sex. Sex is beautiful. It's a gift that God gave to us, you know, to share, you know, and we become one with our spouse during intimacy, not because we say I do. The oneness happens during intimacy. So the two become one. And so that marriage is also the intimacy kind of like of God 3 in 1, you know, and he wants to be invited into that. He celebrates it. He tells us, you know, like, don't go more than 7 days without your spouse. Like we should be enjoying that. But, you know, how do we teach that to, you know, our daughters, our children, or young adults that, hey, it's a beautiful thing, you know, and it can be scary the first time or two. Sure, it's new, it's different. It's kind of like, you know, the first time you get to go and ride a bike, you're afraid you're going to fall. You know, what if I fall? Well, maybe you will, but it's going to be all right. You're going to get back up, right?
Totally.
You know? It's scary no matter how, but
I have
you
a
know,
funny story about that. It doesn't have to do with my honeymoon. I'm just kidding.
I know. We'll talk when
just
we're
kidding.
not
It does have to do with my honeymoon. But.
Right. So how do we have those conversations? And even, you know, going back to the body image, that, you know, again, we want to have modesty because we don't want to put ourselves out there as though to attract the lust of other people, but our bodies are beautiful.
Yes.
You know, and if we think about how God created us, I mean, we co-create with God. How beautiful is it to be a woman, that God chose a woman to, I mean, obviously men are part of the process.
Right.
Sorry, gentlemen, I didn't mean to leave you out there. You are definitely a huge part of it. But
we're the incubators.
We're the incubator to carry what he wants to birth. And how beautiful. Excuse me, how beautiful is that? That our bodies are beautiful, that, you know, we worry about, our breasts are too big, or they're too small, they're too flat, they're just, they have a purpose. They're to feed our children, right? To provide nutrients, and, you know, our arms are for holding, and like we have that, we get to reflect the beauty of God. We get to reflect the nurturing of God. You know, I love that men and women are both created in his image. Right. But women reflect his beauty. We reflect his nurturing. So what would the enemy want to attack? Our body image, our beauty. He'd want to tell us we're not good enough, or we're scarred, or we did this, and nobody's going to want that, or we're not good enough, or God's going to see you as like, you know, I'm going to put a veil over myself to look upon you. No, he doesn't do that. You know, Jesus tore when he died, that the veil was torn. He looks at us. We can look upon the face of God. And so, of course, the enemy is going to want to attack our bodies, or how we see our bodies, the image of our bodies, because we're a reflection of God's beauty, right? And he wants to keep us hidden and ashamed.
That's such a great point, that the enemy will use those special things that God has given us to twist it, and, like you said at the very beginning, pervert it and make it something that it's never was supposed to be. Right. And that's it's so crazy. It's so crazy.
Well, that's how he works. So we just have to remember, he comes to steal, kill, and destroy.
Exactly.
And if we've given our life to Christ, he can't have us. I mean, heaven is our home. That's where we're headed. But if we allow him, we can let him steal our joy. We can let him steal our purpose. We can let him steal our laughter, like all the gifts that God has given us. We can just hand him over if we allow, if we allow him to get so deep into our mind and our soul. We end up just giving our gifts away back to the enemy. It's like, or giving them to him, as opposed to using them for God's purpose. And
Well, before we close, Christina, I want to ask you something, and it might be too tricky, but if we have a listener who has had an abortion before and maybe they're still struggling with the lingering effects of that, as I can imagine one does, what would you say to that person, whether they follow the Lord or not? What would be your message to that woman?
Well, boy, how long do we have? I know you said in closing.
I know. I'm so sorry.
I would say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that you were in a predicament, that you had to make that decision. And if you're still feeling the pain of that, whether it was yesterday or 60 years ago, there is healing for you.
You know, children are innocent, and your child is in heaven with Jesus. Your child is whole, and there is forgiveness for you. And your child has already forgiven you, as mine had already forgiven me. But the Lord doesn't want you to stay stuck. He doesn't want you to stay, you know, He is not here to punish you. And your days of punishing yourself can be over. They can. Because that's not your portion. So I would say there are, no matter where you're listening, no matter where you're listening from, there are organizations throughout the country, you know, that a lot of women go to when they find themselves in an unplanned pregnancy, like a crisis pregnancy center. Many of those organizations also offer abortion recovery programs. There's a local one here that I volunteer at called Choices Women's Clinic. There are almost three locations. The third one's about to open that we do facilitate that. And it's a course, really, a curriculum design that you do in a small group format, designed to help you walk through the pain and the healing of an abortion. So I would suggest that if you have never talked to anybody about it, or even if you have, but you're still struggling with it, maybe reach out to a local crisis pregnancy center. If you're in the Central Florida area, again, Choices Women's Clinic does offer that a couple times a year. Because as much as women or people who work for and volunteer in these organizations love babies, we also love women. We love women. And our heart behind loving women is that they would also see redemption, that there is healing for you. It's not only about the baby. It's not only about the baby. We love women. Yeah. And if you're struggling with that, reach out to someone. I know many women after an abortion, maybe even years down the road, they go into deep depressions. A lot of them struggle with alcoholism. There's many women that have committed suicide over that. But that is not what God wants for you. And He wants to see you set free and whole also. And even if you don't know the Lord yet, I would invite you, if you've tried everything else, if you've tried counseling, if you've tried talking to friends, if you've tried medication, if you've tried self-infliction, if you've tried anything else and nothing has worked, I would challenge you to give Jesus a chance. I would challenge you to do that. You know, I've tried everything and nothing works. Try Him.
Amen.
Try Him. Try Him. And I believe in my heart of hearts that you're going to find a grace and a mercy that you've never known before. I wasn't raised in church. Nobody introduced me to church, to Jesus when I was a child, but I found Him later. I found Him in life in a place of desperation. And so I would challenge you, just try Him. Wow. Just try Him. That would be my encouragement to you.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much, Christina.
You're welcome.
Thank you for sharing your story,
yeah.
being vulnerable and honest with us. And
yes,
I mean, if it's already helped us, I know it's going to help every single person that's listening, because the power of sharing our testimony is so amazing. And and all glory to God for all glory that He's doing.
And the people He's put in my path. And I'll say too, you know, there are moments even in this journey years later where I remember things and I'm like, nope, God's already forgiven me of that. So just understand too, even if you're 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road of healing, that doesn't mean the enemy's like, all right, well, I guess she's good now. I'm going to leave her alone. No, He'll come back and He'll try to remind you, and He'll try to bring up the things. So I just go back to, I'm like, nope, God said He forgave me. He's forgiven me. I'm going to believe what God says over what the enemy says. Who do I believe? So
that's so good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
You're
Christina.
welcome.
This has been so great. Girl, we are on another level of vulnerability.
I wasn't ready.
This is so good. No, but I love it. It feels like a turning point for us personally, and just the topics we want to talk about on the podcast. Like, there's a lot of fun things with friendship and relationship, but there's deep-rooted things that we need to tackle as well. That's why I really love
hard
this.
Things too.
To become
it's not
whole.
all just fluff.
It's not all fluff. A little fluff and a lot of good stuff as well. But thank you guys so much. Thank you, Christina. This was a great conversation.
Thank you for coming.
And thank you guys for watching. I hope this was encouraging and inspirational. And if you're like us, you're like crying in the car right now. Like, I'm so sorry. But I just hope that this was something that maybe you needed. And like Christina said, maybe this is the time to give Jesus a try. This is the time. If you haven't already, you know that me and Alex love the Lord, and this was a deep conversation, but I really encourage you to try and step out, and even right now in your car, if you're listening or wherever you are, just to give yourself a moment to talk to God and just and give him that chance that we were talking about. So share this with a friend. That would be the best compliment you can give us. And also subscribe, like all the things, so that we can continue to grow and do this for all of you, and make it something that is bigger than we can imagine.
Yes.
So thank you guys, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Friends, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Soul Sisters podcast.
Our heart is to bring this encouraging content to you, and we ask that you join us by following or subscribing wherever you're listening from.
And also, share this with a friend who would enjoy it.
We love you, and we'll see you again next week for a new episode. Besitos!